This is what I avoided saying last time. So I guess I'll be more explicit about it now. And you want to know why I avoided saying it? Because I'm deeply uncomfortable and we've created a situation where people can't talk about this without being decried as not a real leftist and just a baby and an idealist and a liberal. No, I'm fine with that. I'm totally cool with that. Yeah, mass murder, cool. Yeah, let's keep talking about it. Yeah, I'm totally fine. I'm not saying everyone in leftist spaces or everyone who's into capital R revolution is being toxically masculine, but I am saying that we've created spaces, unconsciously or not, where people are forced to be the metaphorical cool girl, which typically means accepting capital R revolution as the only rational way forward, and often indulging people in jokes or serious talk about lining everyone up who has profited off the system against the wall. There's a definite revolutionary bravado in many of these spaces that seems to valorize spectacularized violence more than more femme-coded activities of building relationship and trust. And this is not to say that there's something inherent in cis white men. People are thinking that I'm saying, oh, white male, bad. No, there's nothing inherent. Most of my best comrades are the most fiercely compassionate, empathetic, humble, deeply humble cis white dudes. But my biggest issue was that most of these cis men, typically, would come at me not from a position of humility and wonder and, hey, I'm curious, why do you think that this framing is patriarchal? I'd like to learn more, and let's have an open dialogue about this. It's, listen, here's all the reasons that you're wrong, and you need to be quiet. You need to just shut up now. I have many friends who are non-men, who are Marxist-Leninist or Trots or whatever, and they may disagree with me, but they would never come at me with that kind of a posturing. They would never do that. That is such a violent way of speaking to another human and of engaging with them. You have to just sit there and then join the posturing and be like, no, I'm fine with that. I'm totally cool with that. Yeah, mass murder, cool. Yeah, let's keep talking about it. Yeah, I'm totally fine. And from that standpoint, you're not open to learning. This isn't just an intellectual exercise. All of these systems exist within us, and they are perpetuated through us. We have to examine deeply what it is within us that is yearning for that stuff, even jokingly. In my last video, I had people saying, the climate strike or mass protests or food not bombs, these are not revolutionary movements, right? Or people critiquing the yellow vest in France. Well, that's not a revolutionary movement. It didn't overthrow capitalism, did it? Well, no shit it didn't. No shit these aren't going to overthrow capitalism. But the deepening environmental crisis, the austerity crisis, crushing people, making life unlivable, automation increasing, putting people out of work. I mean, there are going to be so many resistance movements and people getting fed up. And that's all of that together, coupled with the fact that capitalism is eating itself, I think will coalesce to force a revolutionary change.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
The rural areas tend to be a lot more conservative, a lot more libertarian, a lot more fascist. So yeah, what's that going to mean for our organizing going forward? How are we going to organize in these rural areas? We should be focusing on that, especially if we can't actually make our livings in the city anymore. Maybe by the time we do clash with the state, it will be much weaker. And maybe actually people in the military or the police will look around and say, hey, everyone has come together and has done a pretty good job building this new society that looks a lot better than what the state and capital is offering. So maybe I refuse to shoot unarmed civilians who have done nothing wrong. Maybe not, probably not. We're probably like, how many times do I have to repeat in my video that things will likely not be nonviolent? When I say defense, community defense, against a militaristic state, I don't see how people thought that I was saying that this would be passive and nonviolent. We don't actually have to rehabilitate images of Stalin or even Lenin to get people on board. All we have to do is convince them that change is coming, and let's get out ahead of this and build the world that we want to take care of us all. It will be way easier to get people here excited and energized about building the new than it will by telling them, yeah, come with us and get organized into a militia with the ultimate goal of violently usurping the state that happens to be directly adjacent to the most powerful military the world has ever seen. I'm sorry, but the days of a scrappy vanguard taking their muskets into battle are over. This is what I avoided saying last time. So I guess I'll be more explicit about it now. And you want to know why I avoided saying it? Because I'm deeply uncomfortable, and we've created a situation where people can't talk about this without being decried as not a real leftist and just a baby and an idealist and a liberal. So a capital R revolution to me is one where there is a vanguard party that organizes the masses, potentially to meet people's needs in the here and now, but very often will decry that most things are not revolutionary and not the main goal. The main goal is overthrowing the government. So this party organizes the workers to overthrow the government and then sets themselves up in that government, that seat of power. But, whatever, it's democratic because everyone is participating all the way down. And then they subsequently centralize, create, central planning, and maintain a police and military force in order to crush dissidents and revisionists lest they rise up and destroy the revolution.
The sparkling drinks are just dandy, the chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I am not throwing anyone under the bus who has earnestly engaged in revolutionary struggle. That is not the point of my videos. So I have never been convinced that this is the route to full communism.
The victory of the Chinese Communists in the Civil War in 1949 brought the country's so-called liberation. It was also the occasion for Mao Zedong to lay out his utopian vision. And in carrying out this vision, the party, so it is said, took a chaotic state in hand and out of a shattered citizenry forged a new China. Frank de Kuyter is a historian at the University of Hong Kong, and in his new book, The Tragedy of Liberation, he shatters this interpretation of the early years of the People's Republic. He joins me now to discuss his book. Frank, 1949 was the year when the Chinese Communists won the Civil War, and the year when Mao Zedong stood on the Tiananmen Gate and said that China had stood up. It's known in China as the liberation, and in a way, a sort of new China began from that date. Both the Communist Party and some in the West consider the next few years, from sort of 1949 to 1956, as a kind of golden age for the Communist Party and for China, a sort of golden prelude before the disasters of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. What is your view, and how did you present your conclusions in your new book?
Right. Well, of course it is. If you compare it to the tens of millions of people who were starved or beaten to death from 1958 to 62, it does look rather good. But the reality is that violence was not so much a byproduct of the revolution in 1949. It was the revolution. And on the basis of very detailed archival evidence, I've reached the conclusion that the Civil War, and the period right up till 1957, the first years of that so-called golden age, really are an era of broken promises, systematic violence, and calculated terror.
I have never been convinced that this is the route to smashing patriarchy. Indeed, I think patriarchy lives on, and it is kind of patriarchal.
Mao did the same thing as Lenin. Lenin and the Bolsheviks promised every disaffected group what they wanted most, and this is what Mao did. He promised the land to the farmers, better working conditions for workers, protection of private property for entrepreneurs, freedom of speech for intellectuals. And one by one, every single promise is broken between 1949 and 1957.
And I'm not convinced, I've never been convinced that we would actually be taking on the US military head on, which is basically what we would have to do in the West.
Mao sets a quote in 1950 after this horrendous land reform that claimed about 1.5 to 2 million so-called landlords killed, which expropriated 10 million people. Then from 50 to 51 is a campaign of terror during which Mao mandates that 1 per 1,000 ought to be killed. In provinces like Guizhou, it goes up to 3 per 1,000. The communists really split these villages, destroy the moral values, social bonds that keep them together. Most of all, oblige these farmers to have blood on their hands, implicate them in the murder of a carefully targeted minority. In other words, land reform really is an act of violence in which enough blood has to be shed in order for a return to the old order to become impossible. Once these poor farmers have participated in mass denunciation struggle meetings and participated in the ritual killing of a number of them, they too fear the return of the nationalists.
I am not convinced. I am yet to be convinced. And to be very frank, I think it would be better if some people would just admit that their end goal is the centralized state with the socialist military and the socialist police and central planning, not as the transition phase between that and full communism, but as the final resting place. Framing the revolution this way makes it out to be yet another war game.
In one single document I found, written by the Minister of Justice, Valorizing, he adds up the victims of the campaign of terror in 6 provinces, comes up with a total of 301,800. That's just for 1 year of terror in 6 provinces. This report is sent to Mao Zedong. In total, I guess about 4 to 5 million people killed in these early years of the revolution.
Look, if the capital R revolution is popping off, you know that I will be there. But I will be majorly side-eyeing, especially when it comes to whatever comes next.
Dun, 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 dun.